A Państwa i moim gościem w tvp.info jest Steve Bannon, były szef kampanii prezydenckiej Donalda Trumpa, były główny strateg Białego Domu, gospodarz podcastu War Room Pandemic, jednego z najgłośniejszych, najważniejszych amerykańskich podcastów. Steve Bannon, welcome to Polish television.
Thank you for having me back. I enjoyed the last time you visited the War Room.
Steve, what's your take on the visit of Polish president, the first visit of foreign head of state in the United States after COVID-19 outbreak?
It was very powerful and very symbolic that the first head of state to come and visit, really through this pandemic was from Poland. Poland is very symbolic to freedom fighters and the people that believe in liberty and freedom throughout the world. Given the struggles you had with the Soviet Union and obviously what's going on in the United States, this rebellion of anarchists and cultural Marxists and Marxists in the streets of Washington, D.C. where the president came is very powerful and very symbolic. It was very much appreciated by the American people. So we want to say thank you, not just to the president of Poland, but to all the Polish people for their support, and particularly for the president coming over during this very obviously trying times in the United States.
Steve, there was a Polish military man, Polish officer, who is also a physician, who is one of the people who were fighting the COVID-19 outbreak and a member of a Polish medical crew that visited and was during the pandemic in the United States. And Donald Trump mentioned his name. What is the message behind this kind of words from President Trump in the Rose Garden, in the White House, directed to the Polish officer from the American president?
It's very powerful. On War Room Pandemic, about 3 weeks ago, we had Jack Posobiec, who is a Polish American, who is a former naval intelligence officer and speaks perfect Mandarin. He was on the show that we were commemorating heroes of the American military for Memorial Day, and he told the story of General Pulaski. Look, the United States, we would have not had our freedom at the time we got it, and with the sacrifice we had been much more horrible if France and particularly Poland had not come into our aid. You know, the Polish generals that came over and helped train the Continental Army were absolutely essential. And we owe so much to the Polish people and to the Polish military and to these Polish officers. And so they held in very high esteem in the United States. At West Point, where my daughter went, one of the most significant and powerful memorials at the United States Military Academy is to a Polish officer who trained the Continental Army on the plains of West Point, these historic plains where President Trump gave the commencement address the other day. Poland's not just symbol in the 20th century of the fight for freedom, but the Polish people coming to our aid. We would have not gotten our freedom at the time that we got it if it was not for that. And that's why I think it was very important for President Trump to talk about that. Remember, in Lafayette Square, where one of the statues are for the Polish generals, right? There's one there right near General Jackson. These anarchists and these Marxists and this cultural Marxists, Poland knows the first thing they have to do is destroy your heroes. Once they destroy your heroes, they take away your history. Once they take away your history, they have you. And this is why Poland's free today. Poland would never kowtow. You never gave up. You never let them take your heroes. You never let them take your history. You were too proud to do that. And because you're a symbol to the West of what has to happen and how people have to fight for their freedom every day, and that these statues are important. They're more important than just something of bronze or of concrete that stands there. They're symbolic for the ideas of what they represent. And this is why it's so important. It's so important for President Trump to talk about it. But remember, it's one of the reasons that the Polish people are held in such high esteem by the American people, the assistance you gave us in the early days of our revolution to allow the American people to be free.
Steve, Tadeusz Kościuszko, that's his monument in the Lafayette Square in Washington, and was one of the monuments that were destroyed somehow during the things that are going on in Washington. What's your take on this whole monument issue? Because it looks like kind of a cultural war. The same day that the Kościuszko's monument was defaced in Washington, the same thing happened here in Warsaw with the monument of the same General Kościuszko, who is such an important person for West Point Academy, and he's having his monument on Lafayette Square in front of the White House. What's your take on this?
Remember, let's use terminology. These monuments are not defaced, they're desecrated. He is a monumental figure in history. He's a monumental figure in history of the West and the history of freedom. It's exactly why they're attacking him. They're attacking him in Warsaw, and they're attacking him in the United States 100 yards from the White House. These are Marxists. This is cultural Marxism. Polish people know exactly what the drill is. They've seen this. They have to destroy your heroes. They have to take your history. They have to tell you everything you've ever known, everything you've ever stood for, everything you've ever believed, everything your families have fought and died for is all a lie, that you're evil. Your history is evil, and you have to be re-educated. You have to be re-educated in their totalitarian, manner, so you're nothing but slaves. That's why the Polish people are such an example of people throughout the world. You wouldn't do it. You wouldn't back down. No matter how many years they beat you down, you would not quit. And that's what the example is here. This is the Marxists. This is the French Revolution. This is the Bolsheviks. Right? This is what happened in China under Mao Zedong. This is the Cultural Revolution. It's the reason the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is in back of so much of this. These are anarchists. These are radicals. These are Marxists, and they must be put down. They must be destroyed. And we have to, under the rule of law, the great institutions and values of the West, of what unites Poland and the United States, under the rule of law, we have to apply that and use the rule of law to destroy this this real pandemic. This is as serious as the CCP virus, the COVID, and it's a serious. I've taken this very seriously from the beginning. The reason is that I happen to know China. I've been going there since the 70s. I'm very honored to be in partnership with Miles Guo, the head of the whistleblower movement. I know China. I knew as soon as that pandemic hit through Miles and all the associates in Hubei province in Wuhan that this is very serious. When a totalitarian government shuts down a province bigger than Poland, with more people than Poland, in Wuhan, a city 40% bigger than New York City, you know that's big. But that pandemic that is now spreading throughout the world and causing huge death, economic carnage, financial disaster, is not as bad as the virus of Marxism, the virus particularly of cultural Marxism. That's the virus that has to be put down. That's the real pandemic. And you can see that pandemic right across the street from the White House. And why did they go after the General Jackson and the Polish general? Because they represent freedom, they represent liberty, they represent people that sacrificed everything. And it also represents, and they know this, it represents the unity of Europe and European thinking and European values with the United States. It's what unites the Judeo-Christian West, and it's those values that these anarchists and these Marxists are trying to destroy, because they want us to end up just like the citizens of the People's Republic of China. Remember, the Chinese people are among the most decent, hardworking people on earth, and they are captive in a system of slavery, just like the Soviets tried to do in Poland. This is a global conflict. It has to be fought, and that's why it was so important for the Polish president to be there.
Could you emphasize on the reasons why the Road and Belt Initiative is related to the American, Polish, and transatlantic issues? We have the initiative of 3 Cs here, which is which is actually understood as a way of stopping the Chinese plan to enter Central Europe via Belt and Road Initiative. Why do you find this thing important in terms of relations between the United States and Poland, and President Trump and President Duda?
One Belt, One Road is just the Chinese logistics system. What they're using it for is building infrastructure for really predatory capitalism, to corrupt your elites and get the elites on their side with payoffs, right? Then to lend money that can never be paid back, foreclosing the money and basically control the country and the infrastructure. It's a very insidious plan, but it's a very brilliant plan. The Chinese Communist Party is quite brilliant. They have massive resources, and they're looking to enslave Europe in this One Belt, One Road initiative coming through Central Asia. The Three Seas initiative is brilliant. Let's put the Three Seas initiative in perspective. The most important speech and the most powerful speech that President Trump has ever delivered, and I include in that his inaugural address, and I include that the magnificent speech he gave in Riyadh to the Muslim world. The most important speech he's ever given was in Poland, in Warsaw, when he came for the Three Seas Initiative conference and gave that speech about the defense of the Judeo-Christian West, the defense of Western civilization, because in Warsaw, that's the friction point that we've always had to fight for the Judeo-Christian West. The Three Seas Initiative is vitally important. The three most important geopolitical areas of the world right now are around the South China Sea, the littoral nations of the South China Sea, and the Straits of Malacca in Southeast Asia, up in Central Asia on the border around Pakistan, China, Tibet, and India, in Central Asia and Kazakhstan, and the most important, I think, right now is actually where the Three Seas Initiative in really what is essentially Central Europe, or what we call Eastern Europe. And that's why Poland's at the front of this. The Three Seas Initiative is absolutely just as important and is inextricably linked geopolitically with the South China Sea. And so it's absolutely important. And that's why intellectuals and people that understand this, geopoliticians in Poland, understand this. And that's why President Trump came to Warsaw. That's why President Trump gave the speech. It's right when I left the White House. It was I left the White House because I'd been there basically a year on the campaign. It was time for me to move on to other things, to kind of get into Europe more and fight more. But it's the last speech I had something to do with. I think it's his greatest speech. And it shows you the importance of Poland. It shows you the importance of the Three Seas initiatives. And remember, the Chinese Communist Party is trying to use its massive wealth in this Belt and Road Initiative to essentially enslave Europe.
Steve, so my final question is related to the thing that all the agencies, international agencies, were talking about ahead of the President Duda visit, pooling troops, moving them partly to Poland. It was confirmed by President Trump and President Duda. And this is somehow related, I assume, to things that Donald Trump is speaking during his speeches. For example, in Tulsa, he spoke on Nord Stream 2. What is the importance and what are the reasons behind these decisions that Donald Trump took and announced them with Polish president at his side in a rose garden in the White House?
Well, listen, this goes back to, I think it's a very smart move geopolitically and geostrategically to reposition those troops into Poland. Also, Nord Stream 2. If you look at it geopolitically, what China and the Chinese Communist Party is trying to do is control the Eurasian landmass. They control the Eurasian landmass first, and they will use that control of the Eurasian landmass through the geopolitical theories of Mackinder, the Scottish geopolitical thought, but talked about the heartland of the world island that is Eurasia. The Chinese Communist Party is trying to control it with their partners Pakistan, Iran, and Russia, and I also think somewhat Turkey, although that's kind of more up to debate. But with Pakistan, Iran, and now Russia. Russia's essentially thrown into them. And remember, I'm a big believer that we need to pull Russia into an alliance of the Judeo-Christian West. I understand that's very controversial in Poland with Polish freedom fighters, given the horrific nature of what the Soviet Union tried to do, and obviously the history of Poland and Russia throughout history. But President Trump, I think, is quite brilliant. I think this thing
and the alliance between Russia and China.
Yes, exactly. I think now we're seeing an alliance between Russia and China. And I think that's why Nord Stream 2 is so important, because what that does is basically give Russia, I think, and I think many people think, too much of power over Germany and over Western Europe, because they control the flow of natural gas, et cetera. And we're trying to offer in the Three Seas Initiative the United States natural gas industry and others as an alternative. But I think it's part of a whole cloth. One thing I think your viewers should take away is that Poland is at the heart of this fight between the Alliance of Liberty, the Judeo-Christian West, India, Israel, Japan, Australia, Brazil, the countries of freedom, the countries of democracy. No matter how imperfect our democracies are how imperfect it is that every day we fight for freedom, we're heading in the right direction. We realize we're all imperfect, as you know, the touchstone of what the Judeo-Christian belief is, that we're fallen and we're trying to perfect ourselves, but we're imperfect and we're trying to work through this. It's much better than the totalitarian dictatorships we see opposite us, which is what China is and what Iran is, and essentially what Russia is, right? So this conflict in Poland, you know, for better or for worse, you're in the middle of this and really at the tip of the spear of it. And so Poland's freedom and Polish freedom fighters, which have been there for millennia, are absolutely essential to this fight for freedom going forward. And I couldn't be prouder to be aligned with the good people of Poland in this great fight, this great struggle that's going to take 10, 20, 30, 40 years. But we'll get through this and we'll be victorious.
Steve Bannon is not an easy man to book on the show, so thank you very much for your time. Steve Bannon was a guest of Polish television. Thank you very much. Hope to see you next time in our program. Steve Bannon, dziękuję uprzejmie.
Great honor. Look forward to having you in the war room when the pandemic's over, to actually have you in Washington and have you in the war room.
Great to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.